The New Orleans Saints finally have their defensive coordinator, and it is the odds-on favorite in Brandon Staley, Kellen Moore's former boss in LA. Now, this is the move I think we all kind of expected from the jump, but now that it is finally official, I want to tell you guys why I am a huge fan of this hire. So, one of the main reasons I am a huge fan of this hire, this puts the Saints in a really unique position where they don't have to worry about something that a lot of other teams do, especially teams that are end up having success. Right? The Saints are uh, in a unique position in that they don't have to worry about losing their play caller on either side of the ball. What do I mean by that? Well, Kellen Moore is an offensive minded head coach. We know he is going to be calling plays for the offense. So when you have your head coach calling plays, you're not going to lose him to another team to for a head coaching job, right? Because he's already the head coach. So you don't got to worry about that side. And then you flip it over to the defensive side of the ball, and now you have Brandon Staley, a guy who was already a head football coach and failed miserably. So he will not be getting another crack at a head coaching opportunity, at least for a really long time, right? He may, eventually earn another one on down the line, sort of like Dennis Allen did after his Raiders tenure. But look, it took Dennis Allen what, 6, 7 years to earn another shot at being a head coach because he failed so miserably in his first go round. So we don't have to worry about losing Brandon Staley. Like if Brandon Staley is a hit and he actually has the Saints defense, top 10 every year, that's great for us because again, we don't have to worry about that guy leaving us for another team for a head coaching spot, right? It puts us in the category with a team like say the Chiefs, right? And listen, disclaimer, I am in no way comparing Kellen Moore to Andy Reid or Brandon Staley to Steve Spagnuolo, but more so the situations. Kansas City has Andy Reid, who is a offensive play caller. He is going to call plays for the offense as the head coach. And then on the defensive side of the ball, you have Steve Spagnuolo, a guy who got his crack at being a head coach and failed miserably, but now has just accepted his fate as being an elite defensive coordinator, right? So they don't have to worry about losing either one of their play callers, right? And that is a big reason why a team like that has been able to be consistent for so long, right? And so many of these top teams that have success struggle with being consistent because, they have a good year and guess what? The next one, they're losing their coordinators, right? I think Philadelphia is a really good example of this, recent example at least. You look at their Super Bowl run a couple of years ago, uh, Shane Steichen, who was their offensive coordinator, had Jalen Hurts ended up having the best year of his career, even better than the current Super Bowl year, right? And then after the season, Shane Steichen leaves to go to the Colts. And then the next season, the Eagles' offense looks putrid, right? Hurts struggles, the entire offense struggles, and they just end up not being a very good football team that year. And same can be said for their defensive side of the ball, right? Jonathan Gannon was their defensive coordinator that year. They make the Super Bowl. Gannon leaves. And again, the defense kind of struggles the next year after that. So when you get a guy like Brandon Staley, who is not going to be a head coach again anytime soon, you don't have to worry about him leaving every single year if your team is even slightly successful. But with that being said, let's talk about Brandon Staley for a little bit. So, how did he get to this point, right? So, in 2020, he became the Rams defensive coordinator. He took over for Wade Phillips after the Rams moved on from him, and he instantly improved that Rams defense. And in just 1 year there, earned himself a head coaching job. Now, it proved to be way too early for him, and he was in way over his head as the head coach of the Chargers. But the fact is, he ran an elite defense for a year and it earned him a head coaching job. That's what really intrigues me here. And look, we have seen firsthand, especially with our guy Dennis Allen, that you can be an elite defensive coordinator and then become a head coach and just become a total donut, right? Like some guys are just meant to be coordinators, and that is perfectly fine. And that may well be what Brandon Staley is meant to be. We'll find out. But talking about his 2020 Rams run that ended up, earning him a head coaching opportunity. So if we look at some of the stats here, right, what is the most important defensive stat? It's opponent's points per game. How many points are you letting up? Because points at the end of the day is all that matters to win football games, right? Obviously, a ton of variables into it, but in the broad side of things, that's what matters. So if we look at the 2019 season for the Rams, this is the year before Brandon Staley got there to take over. So this is Wade Phillips last year there, and no disrespect to Wade Phillips, coaching legend, right? But so 2019, right? You have to go all the way down here to, let's see, where are they at? Do 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 do. Okay, right here, 17th. So they were 17th in points allowed in 2019 at 22.8, right? 22.8 points allowed. And then if you jump to 22, so remember they're ranked 17th, and if you jump to 2020, the year Brandon Staley took over, all of a sudden they jump way up here to the number two spot, the number two ranked scoring or a defense in the NFL in terms of points allowed, right? So they went from allowing 22.8, was it, to only 19.3. So that's what, 2022, well, almost a 4 point difference. And when in terms of the NFL, a 4 point difference is huge because you can see here the difference, between like 1 and 10 is exactly that, only 4 or 5 points. So he takes them and he elevated their game immediately shot them up to the number two ranked defense in terms of points per game, right? From 2019, they were ranked 17th to 2020, they were ranked number two. Let's look at some of the other stats from that year as well. So this is another pretty huge jump. Again, starting in 2019 before Staley got there. This is NFL team opponent red zone scoring percentage, touchdowns only. So how often did teams score a touchdown against the Rams in 2019 before Staley got there? You can see they are ranked 29 all the way at the bottom. Teams scored a touchdown on them in the red zone 69%, or excuse me, 69, nice, 63% of the time. That is really, really bad, okay? So 63% of the time, teams scored a touchdown on them. Now, if we jump to 2020, when Brandon Staley took over, you see down here, they jumped all the way up to 12th, where only 59% of the time did they get a touchdown scored on them. So again, another huge jump in terms of where they ranked when Brandon Staley took over. Okay, next stat I want to look at here is yards per play. This is another stat that you can look at to really get a grasp on how a defense was or how they performed along with those other stats that I showed. So again, 2019 pre-Staley, they're ranked 8th, which actually isn't bad. They lit up 5.1 yards per play. But while they were already decent in that category, when Staley takes over, they're ranked number one with only 4.7 yards per play allowed, right? So all across the board, as soon as Brandon Staley took over, the Rams defense improved. Like that's just something you cannot argue because it happened. So all in all, just to recap, I am a fan of this hire. And one thing I didn't even touch on is I love it because it brings in a guy for Kellen Moore, number one, that he's familiar with because they worked together in LA. He was the OC for Brandon Staley in his last year there. And number two is it it's a guy that has been a head coach before that can maybe give some pointers to Kellen Moore, at least help them guide him through some of these situations that he's going to face. Because again, despite it not working out for Brandon Staley as a head coach, he still has that experience. And I'm sure he has a million different things that he would do different if he were given the chance again, or if he could, give some advice to Kellen Moore on how to get through certain situations or how to handle certain situations, or if a player has this problem, how are you going to handle it better than he did? Just stuff like that, just advice that Kellen Moore, or excuse me, that Brandon Staley can give to Kellen Moore, because again, Brandon Staley has that experience as a head coach that he can hopefully provide to Kellen Moore. So that, coupled with the fact that you don't have to worry about Brandon Staley leaving after every offseason to take another head coaching job, count me in. I hope it works out. Appreciate you guys watching. Peace.